Hi everyone, many thanks for being here today and joining us with AppHub Live. My name is Álvaro Zapatero and I'll be presenting about paid user acquisition with Google. My presentation will be divided into 4 sections. So first we'll try to understand how app campaigns work. Then how can we identify the right user? Third, the impact of paid user acquisition. And finally, retention. How can you keep your users coming back to your app? So without further ado, let's start with the first section, how app campaigns work. Let's take as an example a sports app, because I think that's easier to understand how an app works and how Google works with the app ecosystem. Basically, we combine internal data signals and external data signals, and we make the most out of them so we can understand how to predict the next user for your app. So let's take this example of a sports app. And let's think about internal information of your app, like how many people were visiting a specific section of your app and what kind of sports news they were visiting in your app. And now think about combining this data with external data that Google has about these customers. So for example, we can understand that this user was looking at YouTube videos of Messi scoring goals with Barcelona for the last 3 hours. And we can combine this data as well with other data signals, like for example, this is a huge fan of Cristiano Ronaldo and wants to buy in Google Shopping his jersey. So what we do with this internal information of your app and the external information is combine them, identify the top user for you, and the algorithm acquires that user for you, so you don't have to do any heavy lifting or any extra effort. So going to the next slide, we can understand how actually app campaigns work. And how does the inventory look when app campaigns are running? So basically, as you know, there's different inventories that your app campaigns can target. That's search, display, YouTube, Gmail, AdMob, and Play Store. The way it works is that you just give some bits and budget to your campaigns, upload some creatives, and your campaign will be looking for users in all these inventories at the same time. So the magic or the best thing about app campaigns is that we'll target those users and we'll acquire the cheaper user for you in any of those inventories. Going to the next slide, we can actually see a real example of how these internal data signals and external data signals are combined so we can acquire the user for you. So how does it work? In the example we have here, we just see 4 data signals, but actually at the same time, we are running over 100 million data points for data signals that we can combine so we understand who is the top user for you. So in this example, you can see some data signals like age, purchase size, purchase frequency, or income. The good point or the good thing is that we combine these data signals with the ones we have, and the thing we do is we understand if a user is low value for you, so we discard it, or if it's high value, and then the algorithm can acquire that user for you. Moving on to the next slide, here comes one of the main points or the most important parts of app campaigns, and that's it. How can we understand how to acquire the next user? And what are the goals you need to tell the campaign so we can acquire the user you're looking for? Basically, we can divide app campaigns into 2, installs or actions. With installs, we will be looking for volume. So we don't have to think about installs and actions as a, let's say, alternative or binary option. It's more a journey that you have to run with your customers through your app success. So the way it works is that at the beginning, as I said, you'll be focusing on installs, and you'll be looking for volume. So that's the way you target the users at the beginning. And here you have both installs and installs advanced campaigns. If we move on to the next step or to the next step of the journey with apps, we'll be looking at actions. So that's the target CPA campaigns. And here you can actually define an event and say, for example, you know what? I just want users who are making a first purchase in my app. Or I just want users who are visiting this specific section of my sport news app. So that's the way it works. And that's the way you can target users who are willing to make a specific action in the app. And finally, we have the beta of target ROAS. That actually is the next step. So once the algorithm has enough data of your campaigns, what we can do is actually say like, you know what? I don't want any more volume. I don't want any more actions. I just want to put $1 in this campaign and get back 3. So you basically define how much you want to get back per user in those specific campaigns. Moving on to the next slide, we can actually see into more detail what I was mentioning before. And basically what we can see here is that these campaigns are divided into 2 specific bits. So for installs, you'll be bidding in the target CPI. So that means that target cost per install And actually you're gonna tell the algorithm, I want to bid $1 so I can acquire users in this specific market and just want insights from that users. Moving on to the next section or to the next step, we'll have action. So you can say, I'm gonna bid on target CPA. So I'm gonna bid $10. I'm willing to pay up to $10 for users who make a first purchase in my app. And finally, moving to target ROAS, you just say, I just want users who are willing to pay back $3 every time I put $1 in my app campaigns. So that's basically the main journey or the main way it works with app campaigns. And that's the main overview. And finally, just to close up this section, it's super important to understand how app campaigns work, especially at the beginning, where it takes some time for the algorithm to learn properly how your app campaigns are running. So during the first 2 weeks, there'll be some volatility and some spikes in costs and conversions. Why? Because the algorithm takes time to understand who is your top user, and the more data it gets, the easier it is for the algorithm to understand who is the next user you need to acquire. That's why you'll see during the first 2 weeks, and you can see in this slide, that in the red line, the cost is going to be spiking up and down, and there's going to be some volatility, because in the end, it takes time for the algorithm to understand how to adapt to this bid budget and how to adapt to this user. However, if we take a look at the slide, you can see that after 2 weeks, the cost gets super stable, and actually the conversions spike up, and there's an increase in conversions and the conversion rate. So that's one thing super important to take into account about app campaigns, and is that you need to be patient and you need to give time to the algorithm to run properly. That'll be all for the first section. I hope you're engaged. I'll try to make it as dynamic as possible. So in the next sections, I'll be showing some videos as well. So moving on to the next one, and how can we identify the right user? It's super important to take into account one rule that I'm not sure if you are super aware of, but it's called 80-20 rule. Basically, what we're saying here is that around 20% of your users will bring 80% of your revenue. So you may be asking now, okay, how do I get these 20% users who are bringing most of my revenue? How do you identify them? You may be super aware of the concept of lifetime value, and that's one of the main points here. But basically what we need to understand is who is our top user, so we can target that top user, and we can acquire users who stay longer time with us and spend more money with us. So moving on to the next slide, this is a quite complex slide, but it's super easy to understand if we look at the proper metrics. So what we can see here is that the closer you get to different inventories like YouTube, the higher the conversion rate. So you can see here that you can be moving from search, display, up to inventories like AdMob and YouTube. As you can see, the higher you go on bids, so you can see the different colors, you can see gray, you see yellow, green, and blue. So if you're moving from gray to blue, you can see you're increasing your bids, so either CPI or CPA. What this means is that the more you bid, so the more aggressive you are with your bids, the more inventories you unlock. So you can see actually that for YouTube, for example, you only unlock YouTube users when you are super aggressive with your bids. And you may be asking, why do I need YouTube users and why do I need to be more aggressive with the bids? Well, actually, it's super important to understand that the higher you go with bids, the more YouTube users you unlock and the higher conversion rates. Why? Because YouTube is a premium inventory where there's more engagement because there's more narrative with your videos and with your creatives. So that's why it's super important to take into account that actually with this 20-80% rule, every time you run campaigns, the more aggressive you are, the more premium inventories you unlock, and the more, let's say, lifetime value of users you acquire. And moving on to the next slide, you can actually see how we tackle the issue of making the algorithm work automatically and giving you some key points where you can touch and some levers that you can actually touch to improve the campaign's performance. So basically, you can influence the algorithm in 3 ways to acquire users. The first one is bids, and that's super simple. So as we said, if you want installs, you can say, I'm willing to pay up to $1. If you want actions, you can say, I'm willing to pay up to $5 for a first purchase. Second, you can define the event. So again, conversions and events are super important. And the more you have, the more data the algorithm gets, and the easier it is for the algorithm to understand how to acquire the next user. And finally, we have creatives. If you think about it, the 2 other metrics or KPIs we mentioned are quite automatic. But with creatives, you can be looking for different users in different markets, adapt the language, adapt the narrative. So that's super important. And I would say it's the key pillar. So that's why we always, when we have this kind of discussions with you, try to influence you so much so you are creative excellent, because that makes a big difference for your campaign's performance. So in this slide, I'm going to show you a super interesting video where we can see how the algorithm acquires users for you. And you may be able to understand better how actually the algorithm understands who is the next user to acquire. So in this example, you're going to see Quick Draw, which is one Google product. And actually, you're going to see how the algorithm understands what's a cat. So actually, with different drawings, the algorithm is able to understand with a very simple drawing how to identify the next cat. So let's take the cat as your user, and let's understand this as a way the algorithm is able to predict, in the example, for example, of the sports app, how we can acquire that user for you. So the more data it gets, the easier it is for the algorithm to understand how to acquire the next user in a cheaper way.
When users interact with devices, they create hundreds of different data signals, like search queries, websites, or apps visited, and video watch history. These combinations of signals can be used to deliver more relevant marketing to each user using a technology called machine learning. Machine learning looks at vast amounts of data to identify patterns and categorize that data into something useful. For example, machine learning can identify valuable users based on the actions they complete. It can then find new users with similar profiles who are likely to complete the same actions. With machine learning, the more data you provide, the better it gets at recognizing patterns you want it to find, like valuable new users. Let's look at an example of how machine learning works. Google Quick Draw uses machine learning to guess what a user draws based on similar drawings done by previous users. When a user draws a picture, Quick Draw has been trained with a data set of cat drawings to recognize what a cat is supposed to look like. And with each new drawing, the data set grows larger, giving Quick Draw more data to be able to identify new drawings correctly. To understand how machine learning recognizes patterns in the data, let's see what happens to Quick Draw behind the scenes. In order to recognize that a drawing is intended to be a cat, machine learning looks at different data signals. One signal could be the direction in which the lines were drawn. Many people will first draw whiskers on a cat, starting from the face and then moving out, and Quick Draw can use this to identify if you are meaning to draw a cat. But machine learning could use additional data signals as well, such as the order of the lines drawn. People might start with the left side of the cat's face, drawing the top whisker first, and then a second or third whisker below that one before doing the same on the right side of the cat's face. A scatterplot graph can help visualize the relationship between these two signal dimensions. Drawings plotted in the blue region are classified as cats, and drawings in the red region are classified as something else. Google Quick Draw uses machine learning to create a model or set of rules that helps it identify a boundary in the scatterplot to separate the cats from the non-cats. For example, drawings with signals to the left of the boundary get categorized as cats, while those to the right are categorized as something else. What's really impressive is that Google Quick Draw can look at the relationships between pairs of hundreds of different dimensions at once and set boundaries for each of their scatterplots. Additional dimensions add more rules to the model that can increase Quick Draw's ability to accurately predict a drawing. This is why it's important for marketers to understand the importance of data when it comes to machine learning. When it comes to marketing data, machine learning works in much the same way as Quick Draw. It is able to create complex models to make sense of the vast amounts of data about your users and help you more effectively market to each person.
So as you saw, the algorithm is able to understand what's a cat and how to predict the next cat. And the same way it works for your users. That's why we always insist on having as much data as possible and letting your campaigns run as much as possible so they get enough data to predict the next user. That'll be all for the second section. So we'll be moving on now to the third section, which is the impact of paid user acquisition. To start this section, I want to show you some common statements we get sometimes when we speak about you, when we speak with you and we speak about paid user acquisition. So basically, we get to hear these kind of things like, I don't have enough marketing budget for these campaigns, the CPIs are too high, or I don't really need paid user acquisition because my organic installs are already super high. We're not saying that you are wrong, but we are saying that maybe you're not taking into account some very important key points. So in this example, what we can see here is a very important metric, and is how paid user acquisition combines with organic installs. You can see that on average, every time you put $1 in paid user acquisition, you multiply by 1.5 the number of organic installs. So what this means is that actually there's a correlation between the money you put in paid user acquisition and the positive effect it has in paid organic traffic. Looking at specific categories, because this is like for all categories, you can see that, for example, in App Store, you can see that there's categories like games, lifestyle, or social networking, where it can go up to 5 times. So it means that every time you put $1 there, you're multiplying by 5 the number of organic installs you're getting. Same applies for Android. You can see categories like racing, you can see categories like strategy or tools, transportation, where it can go up to 16 times. So that means that you multiply by 16 the effect on organic installs just by putting some dollars in paid user acquisition. So that's why I think it's super powerful to take into account this information, because it's a great way to understand how combining both paid user acquisition and organic installs, you're able to go to the next level with your app. And actually, speaking about going to the next level with your app, we have this super interesting video. And this is a success story of one of our top advertisers. This is TaxFix, a German company. They started using paid user acquisition with Google, so Google App Campaigns. And actually, the effect was incredible. After 1 year, they multiplied by 1,000 the number of registered users they had in their app. So let's go with the video and you can see this super nice story.
When we launched the TaxFix app, we wanted to have thousands of users, but we realized it's not so easy.
With Google App Campaign, we were able to launch a successful campaign in just a few steps and achieve great results with it. You upload all your creatives, text, videos, you decide how much you want to bid, and the algorithm took care of everything, which was a strange feeling at the beginning, but it was worth it. We were able to grow the number of registered users from around 200 to 200,000 within 1 year. Switching strategy from optimizing towards installs to optimizing towards registration increased our ROI by 25%.
We were very excited because we found a new channel that could scale and could really reach a lot more users. Well, now sky is the limit.
I hope that you enjoyed the video, and as you saw, just by using paid user acquisition properly and being patient with the campaigns, they multiply by 1,000 the number of registered users. So that's why it's super powerful to understand the effect that paid user acquisition can also have in organic traffic. That'll be all for the third section, and we're just moving on to the fourth section, which is retention. How can you keep users coming back to your app? I'm gonna try to make this section as dynamic as possible, so I want to start with a super quick exercise. I want you to take your phone. I know that normally we'll tell you like not to check your phone during our presentation, but in this case, I want you to take your phone, okay? I want you to open it and check what apps do you have in your phone. I'll do the same with you. Just check what apps you have, because maybe you don't even remember what kind of apps you had in the phone. Okay. I want you to raise your hand if you found one app that you didn't use in the last week. In my case, I found many I didn't use in the last week. And I want you to raise your hand if you found an app that you didn't even remember you had in your phone. So that's quite common, to be honest. Like, we just download one app and we don't remember we had it there, and it's there stuck forever. Why are we speaking about this, and why is this connected with retention? Well, if we move on to the next slide, you can see a super impactful metric, and it's that after 1 week, only 37% of your users remain active in the app. And after 1 month, only 6% remain active. So that's why it's super important to work on retention. And you might be thinking, what does Google offer, or what is the solution you offer for retention? Actually, we have a super cool beta that is open to everyone right now, and it's called App Campaigns for Engagement. So App Campaigns for Engagement work for retention for you. And actually, you're going to be able to set one specific event for users that have your app and you want them to accomplish. So let's say, for example, you want to target users who have your app but didn't make a first purchase. Or let's go back to the sports app example. Let's say that you want to target users who have your app but didn't use the app for the last 2 weeks. Or they have your app but they didn't actually go to the sports section you're super interested in the last 2 weeks. What we can do with app campaigns for engagement is target those users who already have your app but didn't make the action you're looking for. And it's going to be super easy for the algorithm first to predict how to acquire that user, to get them at a super cheap place compared to other campaigns. Because actually, if you think about it, we already have a lot of data of that user, plus the relevance of being super specific segmented for that user. And that's a great way for the algorithm to get that user that is very valuable for you. Moving on to the next slide, we can actually see how these campaigns work. So as we said, you just define an event and machine learning is going to take care of everything and going to look for that user for you. So I think that this beta is super interesting and we saw great results from different customers. And actually I want to show you some success stories just before we finish my presentation. We have two super nice success stories of this beta and how retention works. First one comes from Turkey, and this is a huge bank called Akbank. They're based in Turkey and they had an issue with retention because for, I think it was 3 months, they didn't see any users coming back to their app, and they had issues with users who were not using the app for a long time. The strategy they followed was launching app campaigns for engagement, so this beta we mentioned, and actually they saw amazing results, and it's that over, I think it was 5,000 users came back to the app, and actually they recovered 23% of those users that they considered to be lost. Moving on to the next success story, and this will be like the last slide, we have another super cool example of a case study where a Spanish company had this success with app campaigns for engagement. This is the case of Wallapop, and what they were doing was they were defining a specific event or specific user that was power users. So they were the users that brought the most value for them. They were running app campaigns for engagement with this target. And actually the results were amazing because they increased by 42% the number of power users and they decreased by 26% the cost per action. So again, a super cool example of how retention works and how app campaigns for engagement from Google can help you to retain your users. That'll be all from my side today. I hope that you really enjoyed the presentation. And now my colleague Flo is going to present about gaming strategies. So I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Florent. I'm a gaming growth manager in the mobile apps gaming team. And today we're going to talk about comparing marketing strategies for different game genres. So basically, we're just going to take what Alvaro mentioned and see how this can be applied to different game types. Today, we're going to focus on 3 different genres. First one is hyper-casual, then casual, and hardcore games. Before we deep dive into their marketing strategies, let's first define those different genres and how they work. Let's take a very basic example around ships. Let's imagine a ship. Let's hear how different game genres can apply to this animal. And let's start with hyper-casual. So hyper-casual games are very simple games. They have very simple game mechanics. They're what we call tap to play. Their simplicity makes them instantly playable and infinitely replayable. That's why they are highly addictive. And they rely a lot on ads for monetization. So the more the player stays into the game, the more ads he's going to see, and the more revenue you're going to get. This kind of game could be applied to a ship. So imagine a game where you just have to shave the ship, called Shaving Craze, and just have to pass your finger through your screen to shape different forms. That would be a hyper-casual game. Very addictive, very simple, super easy to play. Now, let's see a casual games. Casual games are a bit more complex than hyper-casual, and they have a hybrid monetization model. So they both rely on in-app purchases and ads. They still appeal to a super wide audience, to a mass market audience. For a ship, it could look like an Irish sheep tycoon where you have to develop your farms and to develop your ships, for example. But casual games also include word games, puzzle games, coloring books, and other forms of idle games. The last game genre we're going to see today is hardcore games. Hardcore games are a bit more complex and they appeal to niche audiences of gamers. Applied to the ship, this could look like a ship battleground, for example, and massive multiplayer online shooter games. That would be a hardcore game. So we have those three game genres: hyper casual, casual, and hardcore. The question now is how to make user acquisition for all of those specific games. We're going to use two of the campaigns that Alvaro previously mentioned: install campaign on one side and action campaigns on the other. Let's see how a mix of the use of those different campaigns can apply to your game. Let's start with hyper casual. So hyper casual games rely a lot on ads. So the players usually have a low LTV compared to other forms of games. LTV is lifetime value. So those kind of games are going to face two main challenges. First, competing with high CPI. As I just said, the players have a low LTV, meaning that usually the developers cannot afford to pay a very high cost to acquire those users. So they're going to have a very efficient creative strategy. Second key challenge is bursting into the top chart. That's very important when you advertise for hyper casual. When you make paid user acquisition with Google Ads, you're going to have a lot of volume coming into your game, which is going to make your game burst into the top charts. And this is very important because top charts are going to bring a large part of organic traffic, which is free traffic for you, and that's very valuable to your business. Two tips here. First, start with a high bid to optimize inventory. As Alvaro previously mentioned, it's important that your bid is high enough to compete in all the different segments of the inventory. So it's especially important at the start when the campaign is learning. So when the system knows that your campaign is working on a certain level of inventory, then you can afford to decrease a bit because the learning is already here. Second tip, when the game is mature enough, feel free to use proxy events and action campaign to optimize for retention. So this is how it looks like. This is a mix of install and action campaign. So first, a burst of install campaign to burst through the top charts. And then when the game is a bit more mature, you have action campaigns. Now let's see how it is for casual games as well. As you remember before, casual games have a hybrid monetization. So they both rely on in-app purchases and ads. They're going to face two main challenges. First, a highly competitive market. They appeal to a mass audience, but there are many different game genres that the users can switch from. And second challenge is attracting more players who pay, who actually bring value to your business. So two tips related to that. First, you can bid on events that are correlated with retention and purchase intent. So meaning you can have action campaign optimizing for retention events and action campaigns optimizing for purchase events, both running at the same time. Second tip, use gameplay videos because those are the best performing videos for this kind of game. So this is how it's going to look like. You're going to have your soft launch with install campaign where you're going to gather a lot of learnings about the players, about their behavior, and you're going to be able to launch action campaigns to find maximum scale possible. Remember, both optimizing for retention and in-app purchases. And with your gameplay videos, which are the best performing for this kind of games, you're going to have most of your traffic coming from AdMob, which is the best networks for casual games. Now, let's dig a bit deeper into hardcore games. Hardcore games can both be RPG, strategy, MMO, and shooter games. Those are all hardcore games. As you remember, they rely a lot on in-app purchase. They are what we call IAP heavy. And those games are going to face three main challenges. First one is getting a large enough user base at launch. That's very important because those games which are usually multiplayer rely a lot on a massive volume of players. So you need to have an important launch to make sure that the game is attractive right from the start. Second challenge is find and keep whales. Whales are the most important users you could get because those are the users who spend the most into your game. So you need to find them through action campaign and you need to keep them. The third challenge is support installs for players volume. And that's very important because, as I said before, the game is only attractive if it's a massive multiplayer game. The game is only attractive if there are a large volume of players playing it. So that's why you need install campaign to support the volume of players of the game. So 3 tips related to those. First, try to create demand for your pre-release games to once again have a large enough user base at launch. Second tip would be try to use predictive proxy events. If you don't have enough in-app actions purchased, for example, events per day, then you can try to optimize through the predictive events. And finally, use storytelling videos because those tend to perform best on YouTube, and I will tell you why in a short while. Here's how it looks like. So first, you have a burst of action campaigns optimizing for in-app purchases to make sure that you have a large enough user base at launch. So it's important to have a very strong launch for these kind of games. And you're going to support this massive volume of players with install campaigns, which are going to be steady through the life of the game. As I said before, you're going to need storytelling videos. Why? Because those perform best on YouTube. And YouTube, for this kind of games, is going to be the biggest install drivers, simply because all the gamers are on YouTube, so YouTube is the best platform to reach them. That's all for me. Thank you very much for your time. If you could remember one thing about my presentation today, would be that different games require different strategies, and you just have to adapt your mix of action and install campaign to get to those strategies. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you in the Q&A in a few minutes. Thanks.